The spaceport of Yeltrax Prime buzzed with noise shuttles rising, drones scanning, aliens shouting in 100 languages. In the middle of all this, the tall man in a dusty gray coat didn't belong. His name was Mason Reese, human, quiet, eyes like storm clouds, always watching. He moved like someone who had been to war and barely walked back. A scanner flashed red as he passed, then green. The guards let him through without a word. No one recognized him here. Not anymore, but deep within the royal palace on the hill, someone did. Princess Ilari of the Thalvanar dynasty had waited over a decade for this moment. She stood behind tinted glass, looking down at the port below. Her long silver hair glowed in the dim light. Her violet eyes, sharp as cut gems, locked onto the approaching figure. Her advisors spoke around her, worried about the summit with the Earth delegation, but she couldn't hear them. Her heart beat louder than their voices. She turned. Clear. The room. The ministers hesitated. One opened his mouth to protest, but stopped at her glare. They all bowed and left quickly. Only her personal guard remained, standing like statues near the entrance. Ilari stepped away from the window, placing her hand over her heart. He's here. No one asked who. They knew. They all knew the story. Years ago, when she was just a child. The transport ship carrying her to safety during the border wars was ambushed. Pirates, raiders, her royal guards were slaughtered. Escape pods destroyed. Her life should have ended that day, but it didn't. A human mercenary, Antomar. Outsider caught in the wrong place saved her. One man against many. He fought like a demon and bled like a god. When rescue ships arrived 2 days later, he was barely alive, cradling her in his arms like she was his own child. Then, he vanished. No reward. No name. No trace. Until now. Summit between Earth and Thalvanar was supposed to be political. Trade deals, military alignment, nothing more. But Ilari had inserted a single demand into the agreement. He must attend. No one had understood. Now they would. Mason walked through the palace corridor slowly, led by 2 guards with golden spears. He didn't ask questions. He never liked palaces. Too clean. Too quiet. Too fake. He noticed the carvings on the wall, old battles, royal victories, all the stories painted by the winners. But none of them knew the real war. The one he lived. The one he carried. They brought him to a wide chamber. The ceiling shimmered like starlight. Purple drapes hung down like waterfalls of silk. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, stood the princess. She was no longer the child he once held. She stood tall now, wrapped in a flowing dress of royal white and midnight blue. Her crown gleamed, but her eyes hadn't changed. Still held that same spark. He bowed politely. Your Highness. She stepped forward. The guards tensed. Mason didn't move. Do you know who I am? She asked softly. He looked at her. I've seen those eyes before. You were smaller then. Tears glistened but didn't fall. I never forgot your face, Mason shrugged. Just did what anyone would do. No, she said firmly. No one else would have. They ran. You stayed. You bled for me. Silence stretched. I didn't come for thanks, he said. I know, she replied. But you deserve it anyway. She walked down the steps. The guards reached for their weapons again. Mason raised an eyebrow. Do they always act like this? They're loyal, she said. But not very bright. She now stood close enough for him to see the scar behind her ear. A gift. From that day, I asked the council to find you, she whispered. It took 10 years. Why? I owe you something I can never repay. He shook his head. Then don't try. But she wasn't done. Ilari turned toward the court, the guards, the hidden cameras. All of you listen. The room stilled. This man, she said clearly, is the one who saved me when all others failed. He is not a guest. He is not a commoner. Mason frowned. Princess, don't, she continued. He is the only reason I live. The only reason this empire still has its heir. The royal advisors had returned and stood frozen at the entrance. She took a deep breath. And I have made my decision. Everyone waited. Mason's stomach turned. I will not marry any noble suitor chosen by council decree. I will not join with the son of a lord or the heir of a warlord. Her voice echoed through the chamber. I choose him. Gasps broke out. One of the guards dropped his spear. Mason blinked once. You what? She smiled, eyes shining. I choose you, Mason Reese, as my protector, as my equal, as my consort. Then she whispered, just for him, you saved my life. Now let me give it back. Asterisk, the throne room was still echoing with her words. I choose him. Mason didn't move. His mind, trained for survival, was already scanning exits, watching hands, calculating threats. Not for himself, for her, because what she just said? It wasn't just bold, it was dangerous. The nobles were stunned. Some turned red with anger, others pale with disbelief. A few younger ones whispered in corners, their eyes full of jealousy. This was not how royal announcements were made. This was a storm dropped into calm waters. The High Counselor, a tall thin man with skin like dried parchment, stepped forward. Your Highness, surely this is an emotional outburst. We must. No, Ilari cut him off. This is my will. And you will honor it. He opened his mouth, but one glance from her silenced him. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a ruler. Mason finally spoke. I didn't ask for this, Princess. I know, she said gently. And I'm not asking for anything in return. He looked around. The room was full of eyes, none friendly. They won't accept it, he said. I don't care. You should. Just then, a voice echoed from the side entrance. She doesn't have the right. A figure walked in, a tall man with red skin and black armor marked with royal crests. Prince Orlan, second cousin to the throne and longtime suitor of Ilari. His eyes burned with hate as they locked on Mason. This human is nothing, Orlan said. A nobody from a minor world. He has no bloodline, no power. Mason raised an eyebrow. But I've got good hearing. Do not speak to me, off-worlder. Then shut up quieter. The room gasped again. Even the guards blinked out. Prince Orlan snarled. You insult the royal court. I've insulted worse. Orlan stepped forward, hand on his blade. I challenge you. Mason didn't flinch. To what? A smug off? To the trial of fire, right here, right now. Ilari stepped between them. No. But Orlan's words had already reached the nobles. They began chanting in approval. Trial of fire! Trial of fire! Mason whispered. What is that? Duel to the death, she said quickly, but symbolic. Not meant to be taken seriously in court. Then why are they serious now? Because they want you gone. Mason sighed. Of course they do. Orlan grinned. If he wins, he may keep breathing. If I win, he leaves this palace forever. Mason looked at Ilari. Your call. Her eyes narrowed. No, I won't lose you again. But Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. It's fine, one fight. I've been through worse. Please, he gave a tiny smile. I remember. The last time I held you, you were shaking. I told you, I won't let them take you. That promise still stands. The floor of the hall changed, mechanical panels sliding aside, revealing a sunken arena lit with pale blue fire. This ceremonial trial of fire, normally used for show drama, not death. But today, it felt very real. The crowd surrounded the edges, whispering eagerly. Orlan dropped his cloak, drawing a curved plasma blade. Mason was handed a standard dueling rod, barely charged, an outdated model. He tested its grip, unimpressed. "Is this supposed to spark fear?" "It's supposed to spark," the royal guard said. "Doesn't." Orlin jumped down into the arena, flexing and showing off. Mason followed with a quiet step, eyes locked on his opponent. The princess watched, heart pounding. She wanted to stop it, but she knew the customs. If she blocked the duel, it would show weakness. The council would spin it. They always did. "Begin." The officiator shouted. Orlin charged forward like a beast. Mason didn't move. The blade came fast, humming through the air, but Mason slipped to the side with barely a shift, letting the strike miss by inches. He tapped Orlin in the back with the rod. A crackle of blue light. Nothing fatal, just a warning. "You're slow," Mason said calmly. Orlin growled, spinning for another attack. Mason ducked, twisted, and struck again. A second zap. The crowd was getting restless. "This isn't a show," Mason muttered. "You wanted this, not me." Orlin roared, throwing dirt from the arena floor into Mason's eyes. The crowd gasped. Mason stumbled back, blinking. Orlin swung, and this time, the blade grazed Mason's shoulder, leaving a smoking line. Alari stood in horror. "Stop the fight." The guards didn't move. Mason wiped his eye, now focused. "Fine," he whispered. "Your turn's over." He stepped forward like a shadow, dodged 3 more strikes, then dropped low and swept Orlin's legs out from Habam. Under him. The prince crashed to the floor with a thud, losing his blade. Mason stepped on the weapon and pointed the rod at Orlin's chest. "End it." The officiator yelled. The crowd waited. But Mason didn't strike. He stepped back and tossed the rod aside. "He lives," Mason said. "Barely." He turned away. The crowd fell silent. And up on the dais, Alari smiled. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The silence after the duel stretched like a blade over the throne hall. Mason walked back to the edge of the ceremonial arena, his shoulder still burning from the graze of Orlin's plasma blade. He didn't win because of skill alone. He won because he didn't want to kill. And maybe that scared them even more. Ilari descended the steps and came straight to him. The crowd murmured. Nobles whispered behind their hands. Some sneered. "But you didn't care. You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice low and tight. "Done what? Not kill your cousin?" Mason said, "You're welcome. You're bleeding." He looked down. "Just a scratch. I've had worse." From an angry toaster, she frowned. "You always make jokes when you're hurt?" "Only when I'm scared," he said honestly. "And right now, this whole room scares me." Before she could reply, the High Counselor stepped forward again. His voice was dry but sharp. "This spectacle has gone far enough. The princess has made her feelings clear. But feelings do not decide succession or alliance. We must discuss this properly." Mason narrowed his eyes. "You mean in a room where no one sees?" "Exactly," the counselor said. "Then no." Ilari blinked. "You refuse?" He nodded. "I don't play their game. I don't trust anyone who wants to whisper when they should speak in front of the people." The nobles began to raise their voices, some shouting words like insolence, disgrace, off-world filth. But Ilari raised her hand, and silence fell again. "He has earned the right to speak. As long as I rule, he will not be silenced." The counselor gritted his teeth. "Then perhaps we need to question your judgment, princess." Ilari's guards stepped forward. Mason's hand moved near his belt instinctively, but then, from the upper gallery, a voice called out, loud and proud, "I support the princess." An old noblewoman stood, her gown embroidered with the stars of Falonar's oldest house. Her name was Lady Sorel, a war hero and someone even the council feared. "Do any of you remember the Pirate Wars?" she demanded. "I do. I saw the reports of what happened on that ship. I read the logs. I saw the footage. That human fought like a warrior of legend. Alone." The nobles turned to her, some ashamed. "I lost sons in that war," she continued. "If this man saved the air, he saved all of us. I say let her choose." Another voice joined. Then another. The tide was turning. Alari looked at Mason with a strange glint in her eye. "They're listening." "Not for long." He muttered he was right because far away on the dark side of Yeltrax Prime, an encrypted message was sent from a hidden facility. A signal that activated dormant ships and mercenary networks. Someone had just learned that the human was alive and close to the throne. Back at the palace, the council was forced to agree to a period of observation. Mason would remain by the princess's side, but not as a consort, not yet. A compromise. A delay tactic. But both he and Alari knew they had just become targets. Later that night, Alari led him through the royal gardens, away from ears and eyes. The trees glowed faintly under the twin moons, their leaves turning blue under the light. Strange birds chirped softly. Crystal fountains danced. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "You came here expecting peace, and I dragged you into war again." Mason sat on the edge of a fountain. "I came here not expecting anything. That's usually safer." "Why didn't you accept the title?" she asked. "You could have humiliated them." He looked at her. "Because I don't want power, and I don't want your throne." "Then what do you want?" He didn't answer at first. "Peace, maybe." She sat beside him. "I've never had that either." A long pause, then she spoke. Again, voice soft. "Do you remember the lullaby?" He blinked. "What?" "The one you hummed back then. I still hear it sometimes." "In dreams." His jaw clenched. "That song's from Earth. My mother used to sing it." "I know. I tried to learn the words." She began to hum. Just a few notes. The same melody he thought he'd forgotten. He looked at her. For a moment, the royal titles fell away. It was just them. A scarred man. A grown princess. Two people. Shaped by violence. Still trying to feel something normal, but then, above them, the sky rippled. A distant boom. A ship. Broke through orbit unauthorized. Fast. Heavy. Armed. Palace alarms lit up in red. Mason stood. "Looks like someone sent company." Alari's hand reached for his. "Stay close." He nodded. "Always." The war had begun again, but this time they'd face it together. The sound of sirens echoed across the royal gardens. Red lights blinked between the glowing trees. Mason's instincts kicked in fast, his hand already pulling Alari behind one of the thick stone pillars near the fountain. "Don't move until I say," he whispered. Guards were scrambling through the palace. Walls. Some shouted orders. Others looked up into the sky. One figure pointed toward the flaming trail of the ship descending far too quickly. "That's not a diplomatic vessel," Mason muttered. Alari's voice was tense. "Is it an attack?" He watched the smoke trail falling fast toward the west district. If it's not, it's a very rude visit. Then the explosion came. A fireball lit up the horizon behind the outer domes. Glass cracked, alarms screamed louder, and pieces of the palace shook as if the whole mountain trembled. Distant screams rose from the lower districts. Mason grabbed the princess's arm. "We're leaving." "My people. They'll survive. If you stay alive." She didn't argue. They moved quickly through the garden tunnels, ducking under archways and passing through quiet servant paths that hadn't been used in years. Mason knew where to go. He remembered the blueprints he studied. When he arrived, one of the few conditions he asked before agreeing to visit as they reached a hidden corridor beneath the throne room, two guards appeared with weapons raised. "Halt." One shouted. Mason didn't even blink. Lower those or I'll feed you. Your own boots. The guards looked uncertain until Ilari stepped forward. He speaks for me. Now open the passage to the escape vault. The guards obeyed. Inside the vault was a secure room built into the bedrock, meant to hold out during war, supplies, comms, emergency weapons. But most importantly, silence. Ilari sat down, her breath finally shaking. Who would dare launch an attack inside palace territory? Mason pulled a compact rifle from the locker. Someone who doesn't care about consequences, she frowned. You think this is about you? He didn't answer, but deep down Mason already knew. The moment her declaration was made, he became a threat not just to jealous nobles, but to forces beyond the stars, hidden players who watched from the shadows, and now they were moving. One of the consoles beeped. A palace operator patched in. Princess, we're under siege. Unmarked mercenary crafts just disabled orbital defenses. They're landing troops in the old trade zone heading toward the palace. How many? The operator hesitated. Too many. Mason looked at the screen. They'll breach the outer gates in 20 minutes. And the Royal Guard? Ilari asked. They're holding for now but being pushed back. Mason checked the weapons locker. Not enough for a full defense, but enough for a fight. Where's Orlan? He asked. The operator replied, in the infirmary. He survived, but unconscious, Mason grunted. Of course he is. Ilari turned to him. You don't have to stay. If you run now, no one would blame you. He looked at her. Run? Princes, I came here thinking I might leave again. But you changed that. They're not just attacking the palace. They're attacking you. And that means they've made it personal. She said nothing, but her hand touched his briefly. He went back to the screen, studying enemy movements. These guys, they're professional, not pirates, not rebels. Someone rich hired them. Ilari's eyes narrowed. The council? Maybe, maybe not. But someone wanted you dead or married off before the summit with Earth tomorrow. If you disappear, the alliance falls apart. They want to break your power. And yours, she added quietly. Outside, more explosions rocked the air. Suddenly the lights flickered, then cut out. Backup power switched on with a hum. They've breached the main hallway, shouted the operator. Repeat. Enemies inside the palace. Ilari stood. We can't hide. No, Mason said. We fight smart. He grabbed the cloak from the vault wall and handed it to her. Wear this. It'll mask your energy signature. Where are we going? Out the secret side tunnel. Then we hit the barracks. We need a real weapon, something big enough to stop a dropship. And then? He met her gaze. Then I show them why they never should have touched the girl I saved. She looked at him, really looked. Not just as her savior, not as a bodyguard, but as a man willing to burn the stars for her. They left the vault and stepped into the shadows. The palace was burning, but inside that fire, something stronger was rising. Not just survival. Revenge. And maybe something more than that. The palace was no longer quiet or beautiful. Smoke filled the high halls. Shattered crystal lined the floors. Fire burned along golden walls where once paintings of ancient rulers had hung. Now it looked like a war zone because it was. Mason moved ahead, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. Behind him, Ilari wore the energy cloaking cloak, its shimmering surface hiding her heat signature from enemy scanners. They stayed close to the walls, slipping through shadows and rubble. The sound of boots echoed nearby, mercenaries, armored and well-trained, sweeping the halls like they owned the place. They've already locked down the barracks, Mason said, glancing at a flickering wall screen. We can't reach the heavy weapons? Ilari asked. Not from here, but there's another option. He turned down a side passage that looked unused. The floor was cracked, the lights broken. But he moved like he'd walked it before. This was part of the old catacomb defense. Network, he explained. When I studied the palace blueprints, I noticed something odd, an old vault that was sealed before the last war, never fully cleared out. And what's in there? She asked. Something loud, I hope. They reached a heavy iron door covered in dust and scorch marks. Mason knelt, connecting a small cube to the side panel. It buzzed, then clicked. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark room filled with ancient weapon racks, sealed armor, suits, and a single long case in the center marked with Earth military symbols. Alari stepped forward. You hid this? I salvaged it years ago after a mission. Didn't want it falling into the wrong hands. He opened the case. Inside lay a pulse cannon, an old but powerful Earth weapon, illegal on most worlds. Its core glowed faintly with blue energy dots. She stared. That could punch through a dropship. He grinned. That's the idea. Suddenly, his earpiece crackled to life. It was the palace operator again. They've reached the throne hall. The council's been taken hostage. Mason cursed. They're forcing a surrender. What about Orlan? Ilari asked, still unconscious. The voice replied. They don't care about him. They only want the princess. Alari's eyes darkened. Then let's make them regret wanting me. They moved fast. Mason strapped the pulse cannon to his back and took 2 smaller detonation packs. We'll go up through the servant lifts. They never check those. We flank them from behind. She nodded, her face calm, focused. Do you trust me? I trusted you since the day you grabbed my hand and didn't let go, he said. They reached the upper corridor that overlooked the throne hall. Mason peeked through a crack in the decorative wall panel. Below, a dozen mercenaries stood guard. Guns aimed at the kneeling council members. At the center of the hall stood a new figure, one not in mercenary armor. A tall man in a dark suit, his skin pale, his eyes glowing faintly yellow. He wore no insignia, no name, but Mason knew his kind. Who is that? Alari asked. Mason's voice dropped cold. Ex-Spec. A rogue black ops unit. Trained to take over entire governments from the inside. Who hired them? Whoever wanted the Earth Alliance dead. Down below, the leader began to speak. Princess. Alari has vanished, he announced to the council. Her guards are gone. Her rule has failed. You will sign over control to the committee. Now. One of the counselors raised his voice. She is alive. We will never. The ex-spec agent pulled a small plasma pistol and shot the feds and the counselor in the chest. The old man crumpled. Alari gasped quietly. Mason's hand reached out and gripped hers. We end this, now. He placed one of the detonation packs on the far wall, then armed the second and placed it above the throne arch. He gave her a quick nod. On my signal, go for the stairs. I'll draw the heat. She gripped a stolen sidearm and whispered, Don't die. Not today. He pressed the trigger. The walls exploded in a flash of fire and dust. Mason leapt through the smoke, pulse cannon blazing. The sound shook the chamber. One mercenary flew back with a scream. Another dove for cover. Panic. Chaos. And then the cloaked figure of the princess appeared through the pincer. Smoke, her cloak dropping away as she moved through the madness with her pistol raised, firing 2 clean shots into stunned mercenaries. Moved like she belonged in battle. Mason dropped behind the throne and took cover. You were supposed to hide. I changed my mind. The ex-spec leader aimed at her, but Mason fired first. The cannon's blast slammed into the floor near the man, sending him flying across the room and crashing into a column. In seconds, the fight was over. The last few mercenaries surrendered. The smoke cleared. Mason walked to the throne and stood beside the princess. The council was silent. Then one member spoke, voice shaking. What now? Alari looked at them. Then looked at Mason. We prepare, she said. For what? They asked. She raised her chin. For a new kind of rule. Asterisk, the throne room was in ruins. Smoke still hung in the air. Pieces of armor and scorched fabric littered the floor. The unconscious ex-spec leader groaned beneath a fallen pillar, his armor sparking from internal damage. Ilari stood before the council, covered in dust, her silver hair tangled, her royal gown scorched at the hem, but her presence had never been more powerful. Mason stood just behind her, pulse cannon still humming faintly on his back. We were attacked in the heart of our empire, she said, voice steady. By mercenaries, trained, paid, supported. Not by rebels, but by those who fear the future. Number. One dared interrupt, she continued. I will no longer sit on this throne and pretend politics can solve everything. I will lead, and I will not lead alone. All eyes turned to Mason. Some of the counselors looked unsure. Others still held on to the old traditions, unwilling to accept a human standing beside royalty. One counselor finally spoke. You've proven your strength, Princess. But what of the summit with Earth tomorrow? We were to present a united, peaceful empire. Not this chaos, she nodded, and we still will. But I will no longer pretend. Earth deserves the truth. And so do my people. She turned to Mason. You said you didn't want power, that you didn't want the throne. I still don't, he said quietly. Then stand beside it. Stand beside me. He looked at her, at the way her hands trembled only when no one was watching, at the pain behind her eyes, at the fire she hid beneath a calm voice. I'll stand where you need me, he said. A message came through the palace comms. Emergency report. Reinforcements from Earth have arrived in orbit. Their ambassador requests immediate meeting. Mason blinked. That's fast. Too fast, Ilari whispered. They made their way to the upper reception dome, a transparent hall with a view of the sky and stars. Earth's flagship hovered above the capital, sleek, silver, bristling with defense turrets. The Earth ambassador stepped into the room, flanked by human marines. A tall woman with short silver hair, deep wrinkles, and sharp eyes. Her name was Admiral Tessa Miles, one of Earth's oldest and most experienced diplomats. She looked at Mason first. Well, she said, you really know how to make noise, Reese. Didn't mean to, he replied. She turned to Ilari. Princess, you handled yourself like a warrior. That report, the one we received this morning, said you were dead. Clearly that report was wrong. Yes, and I suspect someone wanted us to believe it. Mason stepped forward. Admiral, who sent the report? She sighed. It was routed through an old diplomatic channel, traced back to a Thalvanar satellite. Not official, but fast enough to nearly cancel this meeting. They wanted Earth to leave, Mason said, to walk away before the alliance could be sealed. And it nearly worked, the Admiral said. But we waited, and now I see why. She studied Ilari closely. I have one question, Princess, and be honest. Will your people follow you after this? Ilari took a breath. I don't know, she said. Some will. Some will fight me. But I'd rather lead a small group of loyal people than command a large empire built on fear. The Admiral smiled. Good answer. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small cube. Then Earth is ready to confirm the alliance under your rule. Ilari reached for it, but before she could touch it, Mason moved, fast, grabbing her wrist and pulling her back. The cube exploded in a burst of white. Mist. Everyone froze. Poison. A gas meant for silent kills. The Admiral's guards collapsed instantly. Mason shoved Ilari behind a shield column. Trap! The Admiral fell to her knees, coughing, her skin turning pale. Not me, I didn't. From behind her, another figure stepped forward, someone who had walked in with the Marines but had remained quiet. His face shifted, flickered, then changed. A shapeshifter. Too easy, the imposter said with a smirk. The chaos made everything easier. Mason fired his sidearm, but the assassin rolled aside, vanishing into stealth mode. Alarms blared. Alari helped the real admiral to safety as Mason scanned for heat signatures. He's here somewhere. We have to leave, Alari said. He won't stop, not until I'm dead, Mason nodded grimly. Then let's give him a reason to run. Together, they sprinted toward the command deck. Behind them, the doors sealed automatically, but a soft voice echoed through the chamber. You? Can't run forever, princess. The hunter was loose, and the final move was coming. The assassin was still somewhere inside the palace. The real Admiral Miles was recovering under medical care. Her team had been poisoned by the shapeshifter's trap. Earth's fleet was on high alert, but no one dared open fire not without confirmation the princess was safe. Mason and Alari reached the upper command deck, a place protected by biometric locks and emergency shields. From there, they could control palace defense systems and signal for backup. Inside the chamber, lights flickered. The assassin had already accessed the system. Mason closed the door behind them and sealed it. Do you think he's in here? Alari asked, breath short. I know he is, Mason said, scanning the corners. He wants to end it himself. From the shadows, a distorted voice answered. Correct. The assassin stepped forward slowly, his form flickering between disguises. For a moment he looked like Mason, then like a palace guard. Nan. Number. Face at all. Just smooth skin. A true changeling. You're clever, the shapeshifter said, but not clever enough. He raised a plasma blade. Mason stepped in front of Alari. You should have stayed hidden. The assassin lunged. Fast. Inhumanly fast. Mason blocked the first strike, deflecting the blade with his forearm guard, then countered with a punch that sent the changeling stumbling. But it wasn't enough. The assassin twisted and slashed again this time, slicing Mason's side. He winced. Backing up, Alari reached for a control panel. I wouldn't, the assassin warned. Touch that and I kill him. But Alari didn't stop. Do you know who he is? She asked. Do you know why he saved me all those years ago? The assassin paused. Because he was paid? No, because he made a promise. She hit the switch. Steel shutters dropped over every door. The windows sealed. A shield dome locked the entire room. The assassin was trapped with them. You should have run when you had the chance, Mason said, standing upright again, blood dripping. From his side, he pulled a small sphere from his belt and crushed it in his hand. A burst of heat shimmered around him. The changeling tilted his head. What is that? Heat marker, Mason replied. Now the orbital cannon sees you, even in disguise. Bluff. Alari looked up. Satellite control. Confirm target. Lock inside dome. A voice answered through the speaker. Target confirmed. Awaiting final command. The assassin growled. You'd kill yourself to stop me? I'd die for her, Mason said. And I'd live for him, Alari added. Stepping beside him. The assassin's face twisted. You're both insane. Mason raised his wrist. Satellite fire on my mark. The changeling leapt forward in a final desperate attack, but Mason had already moved. He ducked low, grabbed the creature's arm, and slammed him into the control panel. Sparks flew. The assassin screamed, Mark! Mason shouted. Outside, the sky lit up. A narrow beam of white-hot energy fired from the Earth flagship in orbit. It pierced the command tower dome with perfect precision straight into the locked signal beacon attached to the assassin. The changeling evaporated in a burst of heat and ash. Silence fell. The beam shut off. The shield dropped. Smoke rose from the spot where the assassin had stood. Mason dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Ilari rushed to him. You're hurt. He chuckled weakly. Only on the inside. Idiot, she whispered. Brave, stupid idiot. You love me for it. He murmured. She paused. Then smiled. Yes, I do. 2 hours later, the alliance ceremony resumed, this time with the palace secured. Earth's marines guarding the perimeter, and every major Thalvanar noble present. No more hiding. No more games. Ilari walked into the center of the hall, dressed. Now not in her royal gown but in light armor, marked with her family crest and the symbol of Earth's alliance. She was not just a princess. She was a leader of the future. Mason stood beside her, now healed and in a formal Earth diplomatic uniform, though his sidearm was still strapped to his hip. Just in case, Admiral Miles addressed the gathered leaders. Despite betrayal, despite chaos, one thing stood firm, the will of this princess, and the courage of the human who once saved her. The hall clapped. Even the once skeptical council members. Ilari stepped forward and spoke clearly. My people, today we no longer serve fear. We stand with truth. We join hands with Earth, not because of politics, but because of trust. And I give you proof. She turned to Mason. I now name him not just my protector, but my chosen consort. The one who stood with me when all others fell. My partner. My equal. The room erupted, some in joy, some in disbelief, some unsure, but no one dared challenge her again. Later, when the stars returned to peace and the crowd had left, Ilari and Mason stood alone in the gardens. Same place where they had hidden just days ago. You know, Mason said softly, I still don't understand why you chose me. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Because you saved me then, and again now, but most of all, because even after everything, you still looked at me like I mattered not as a crown, but as a person. He smiled. Guess I'll have to keep doing that. She looked up. Forever? He nodded. Forever. And beneath the stars, the girl who once cried in his arms kissed the man who never forgot her.